honestly can't believe that I have RJ in front of me right now. Like, I just feel like it's been so long, and like you've been doing so many, just out there going to Wharton and like doing all that stuff. Like, it's just been, I don't know, a very long time since like I've seen you and been able to catch up with you. So it's super great to, have you on the pod today and to kind of like, learn about what your journey's been like and what you've been up to and the world of databases and all that jazz. But how are you doing? Where are you actually, even in the world, like right now?
Yeah, I'm here in Barcelona. It's really great to be part of the podcast, and I wish people in my day-to-day life shared your enthusiasm for how I've been and databases and stuff like that. So I think I found the right place. So hopefully this can be like a multi-part session if you're gonna be this nice to me.
Of course, of course. Like, even though, we were rivals, I feel like in high school, it's healthy competition. You gotta have that iron that sharpens the iron. So
Well, I don't want to sound arrogant. I never really saw you as a rival. No, I'm just joking. Of course, and obviously, look, you're doing really well for yourself in Microsoft and stuff like that. And it's always great to see someone from Saint Martin kind of go out, leave the island, and then and make their mark on the wider world, right? So especially with a company like Microsoft. So I'm just happy both of us have managed to build, or at
I
least
feel
start
it.
building careers.
I feel like it was gonna happen though. Like, I don't know. It just kind of seemed like it was like we were gonna go in that direction. I couldn't tell you how, but it just always seemed like that was the inevitable. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people that have like a lot of potential and a lot of talent, but if you
Yeah.
you know somehow lose that drive or ambition, or you get steered on the wrong path, it doesn't always work out, right? So I think like just being grateful for the fact that we did, and to be honest, I don't think we've made it at all, right? Like there's still so
Right,
much more to go,
exactly.
so let's not celebrate too
Exactly.
early either.
Exactly, exactly. I feel it, I feel it. But why, like, what brought you to Barcelona, like, of all places? Were you just like, I'm over America, been there, done that. We need some new inspiration in life.
It wasn't quite that. So, as just to give the audience a little bit of background. So, I'm also from Saint Martin, as Harsha is, and I went to UPenn to study business at Wharton in 2015. It's hard to believe that was 8 years ago. And basically, how it works for citizens outside of the US, I have a French passport, being from the French part of Saint Martin, is you have a 1 year extension of your visa to work if you're not in STEM. I think you did STEM, right, Haisha? So you got two
Yeah,
years
yeah.
OPT.
Well, I mean, I was fortunate enough to get a green card like in
Okay,
2016, so it kind of like made it a
right.
lot easier for me. But I agree, yeah, there's definitely those limitations once you're an immigrant in America for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So at the time it was 2020. I was living with my girlfriend at the time in Philadelphia, and I recall my company was sponsoring my visa, but during March 2020 with COVID, it wasn't like the best time to be in a tentative immigration status. So ultimately, the immigration program kind of took a halt, and I was left with the decision, right? Like, what am I going to do? So I'm okay in a couple of other languages outside of English. Like I'd say Spanish, well, Spanish now, and Hindi from my heritage, and French are like passable, but not to work. So I knew I had to move somewhere in Europe, and Dublin was that choice. And I did end up in Dublin for 3 months during a lockdown there as well, right? Because COVID was global, obviously. And my manager kind of noticed, like, wasn't really doing much during the weekends. He'd ask me, like, what did you do this weekend? And basically all I had done was stay at home, and when you join a company, they might have some learning platforms and like modules and videos. I was just binging those, which sounds so sad that I was like, in a new country, just watching like educational videos. And the Irish culture is really great, and everyone's sort of very much focused on like enjoy your life. Like you work to live, you don't live to work. So he actually let me work remotely from St. Martin for a year, and by that point, they told me you need to come back to Europe now for legal tax residency purposes. However, we're opening the new Barcelona office. So if you're interested, then you can go there. And of course, Barcelona is one of the most exciting cities, most culturally vibrant places in the world. So it was a no-brainer for me. So that's how I ended up here. I believe in it was October 2021 is when I moved over. So yeah, that's just a bit of background on that story.
Super cool. I guess like how do you like Europe compared to like America, or like do you like are you vibing more with the European culture just given like our upbringing and background, or was it like, America had its charm to it,
Yeah, I get asked that question a lot, obviously, having lived in a few places. And I've lived in a few places in Europe as well, like, Holland. I've been to London several times, Dublin, as I mentioned, and now Barcelona. I think it's interesting, like, you can't really compare the US to Europe because I feel like Europe is multiple different cultures under one continent, and America is also multiple different cultures under one state, right? Like the cultural attitude and beliefs of someone from Texas versus someone from New York versus someone from California. It's almost like three separate countries in itself. So I always look back on my time in the US very fondly. I really enjoyed, and I know that sometimes like Americans' reputation abroad may not be the most shining, but
Yeah.
in my experience, like the people were always very very nice, like, and at the end of the day, right, America is the cultural trendsetter of the world. Like even here in Europe, everyone's kind of like tastes in fashion, in music, like the trends are largely influenced by America. So I know that's a bit of a winding answer to your question. I would say that culturally, like there's obviously huge differences, and Spain is very different from the Netherlands, and so on and so forth. Um, I'm really enjoying it here, but I also really enjoyed it in the States, and I wouldn't rule out going back to the States if the right opportunity presented itself.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I enjoy, like, I totally see what you mean. Like, every state definitely has its own, like, personality. And, like, it's so interesting seeing, like, the diversity within America and then just seeing, like, the generalization of Americans. It's, like, very, like, they do check that box, but they're not all like that. And it just, yeah, I guess depends where you go and who you
Yeah,
run into. But, like,
yeah.
how was Wharton? Like, how, because I feel like going to such a prominent business school, like, was it very stressful and competitive in that environment? Because at least like the business school at Michigan, they just at Ross, they just seem to be having a ball, every day, and I was just like crying in the engineering campus, like if only.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, so obviously I wasn't in engineering, I was in the business side, but I had my first roommate, a guy named Anthony Nardone, who went on to work in mechanical engineering for Disney and now is at Tesla. So quite a
Super
glowing
cool.
record there. I remember he was like stressed and like pretty much seemed to be working almost every hour of the day, whereas I wasn't working as much. I think a challenge I had is as I got into Wharton, coming in at 17, my whole kind of academic trajectory was building to that point, and I felt like, oh, when I finally got there, I kind of felt like, great, I'm here and I've done it and I've achieved what I needed to do. Whereas in reality, it was actually like, oh no, like the real hard work has not even started. Like you need to go there. And I remember my first week on campus, like meeting some people who had already started companies, and like I just felt a bit kind of like I'm really out of my
Shit.
league here. Like these,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
like these are like these are genuinely the smartest people, and you do have a bit of imposter syndrome sometimes where you kind of think to yourself like do I really deserve to be here? Like there are probably millions of people in the US and globally that didn't get in, and maybe just because I applied from a smaller island like St. Martin or from a region like the Caribbean where you don't have as many applicants, maybe that played in my favor. And I don't think I took the best advantage of my time in school. I think I could have done more to network and really embrace the resources on hand. I kind of let my guard down a little bit, um, and I wasn't really competitive in the sense of I wasn't looked at for some of the top jobs available at the big four consulting firms or the larger investment banks like some of my friends were, and but to be honest, looking back on it, I don't really regret anything. I enjoyed my time, and I also feel like in general, like now that I'm in Europe, nobody cares about the fact that I went to Wharton, and in my company nobody knows.
Hmm.
And if they know, it's good. Like if they know, then it's kind of like, oh, okay, that's really, great that you went there. But equally, like I know a lot of people at Wharton who weren't very smart, and maybe they probably didn't deserve to be there. But at the end of the day, like you all get the same diploma, and I think once you do your first job outside of college, it really is more around your work experience that matters. So for me, like it was good to go to Wharton. Like it was great to say like, yeah, I've been to Wharton. But if anyone's listening out there that like isn't going to a top tier Ivy League school, or isn't even going to school at all, I really don't think that college means it. I think the primary objective of going to a university is to demonstrate to prospective employers or to people in your life that you can take something from start to finish, and you can like stick to something and accomplish a goal, which is getting a degree. um, to be very frank, like if I look at my career now and where I want to go, I don't think even a college degree is necessary. I think like I'm in software sales. I think there's like a degree of inherent traits and qualities that you need for that job, and then the rest can kind of be coached or taught to you. So yeah, that's a bit of a cynical answer, and I don't know if my Wharton professors or colleagues or classmates would be happy to hear me
You're like,
say that.
what,
Like,
bro? How can you say
yeah,
this? But I feel you. I definitely think, like, especially today, having a degree is not what it used to be. And I definitely think, like, I don't know if it's just LU, but it's just like there's definitely this like push of like you have to go to school in, one of these foreign countries, and like if you don't, that you're doing something wrong with your life. And it's actually like not really like that once you get there. Like you realize like you said, like at the end of the day, it's just like a piece of paper that just proves to someone that like you are able to commit. Like you commit
yeah.
to something challenging and you made it through. But what like makes it for you at the end of the day is like, yeah, your mindset and like your willingness to fail and like try things and put yourself out there, and just not, or even like networking. I honestly think college's biggest value is just the network that you build. But I agree, like I definitely was slacking because I, like you, it's just kind of like you work so hard to get to that point. You don't really plan
Past
after
that.
that. It's just like, oh, I need to get into school. I got into school. I got the scholarship. Great. And then you get there and you're like, wait, these people have made how much money in high school just reselling sneakers
Yeah.
online with like some algorithm? Just like, holy shit. Like, I didn't even know you could start a podcast. Like it's just like so, I think, different when you think about the kinds of opportunities or perspectives that people have, that you're like, holy crap, like these people are really on it. But at the same time, it's like we're all here and we all make it through somehow, but it doesn't like make you better than other people. And I think that's sometimes where like it can be tough, because at least where I work, like people like to do the whole like college flex thing of like, oh, I went to Harvard, blah. That means like I'm hot shit. But it's like when you see their work, you're like, I don't know what that Harvard degree really gave you other than an
Yeah.
ego problem. And it's like you still do have to work at the end of the day. Like you still have to constantly be proving yourself or like building and developing in some way.
I think also like to complement that point, like there's a couple of factors I've realized. One is doing things to live up to other people's expectations rather than what you want. Like my parents, for them and for their own self assurance, like their son going to a good university is a validation that they succeeded as parents, right? Because they obviously raised someone who is like capable enough of achieving something like that. And part of it is kind of like, oh, like I want to go to college, because if I don't go to college, it doesn't reflect well in a societal sense on like my upbringing, and that reflects on your parents. So there's that component to it. The other thing I also learned is like, I find, and then this goes for me 100%, like there's a lot of people where perception matters more than reality, and there's a lot of people who are kind of faking it. But due to our own insecurities, like we don't even really realize that nobody else has the answer either, and we just may think like, oh,
Facts.
I'm not like, oh, that guy went to Harvard, so like without even knowing the quality of his work, like you just automatically say like, yeah, he's going to be good. Whereas in reality, like sometimes the people that come with the biggest reputations, they may have done something good once, and then they're kind of like building on it from there. So I think the
Exactly.
like that's important. And just going back to your cultural piece, like I don't think I've ever heard. I don't think I've ever heard someone in the European part of MongoDB, which is the company I work for, ever talk about where they went to college. Like, and maybe that's a cultural thing as well. But it's sort of like, I'd say Europe is maybe a bit more like less like kind of braggart or braggadocious. I
I
don't know
feel
what the
you.
word
I
is,
feel
but
you.
yeah,
That's the word that I was thinking. I was like
braggadocious.
braggadocious,
Yeah,
whatever. Yeah, I feel you.
braggadocio or something. Yeah,
No, it is, I think, a very much a difference in culture, which, despite the fact that we did go to an American high school, I did have like maybe this idea of America and how Americans were, just like from the tourists that come to the island and just like the teachers that we have, and then kind of like experiencing like what, or at least maybe Midwestern and Western cultures are like in America. There's definitely this like you were saying, like this fakeness, pretentiousness, needing to prove that you like are somebody, which is like, I don't know, to me it's just too much of a hassle. I'm just like, who gives a shit? Like, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, are you a good person or are you not? But it's like very interesting that people hold on to these labels of like, oh, you work where? Oh, you do what? Oh, okay, I want to be around you because that makes me look good, or like then I can say like I know
yeah,
this person or whatever. And I'm like,
yeah. I know,
who cares? Like,
I
who
know.
actually gives a shit?
I mean, I think like we all have that to a degree. Like, how am I being perceived by other
Yeah.
people? Because I think inherently we all have a like an instinctual and maybe even evolutionary need to
Fit
feel
in.
accepted, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we all want that. But what I also realize is like the amount of time I spend worrying about how a action or whatever I do is going to be perceived by someone. Like, I took a second to realize like, man, I don't fucking notice that shit about other people ever. Like, I don't even care whatsoever. And the time that I spend worrying about how this is going to reflect, like, I could actually just improve myself and just eliminate the insecurity altogether. Like, I don't know, for whatever walk of life or facet of life, whether it's like appearance, your intellectual ability, your physical ability, whatever it could be, like. And I've wasted so much time, and I'm sure this goes for everyone because we're all human at the end of the day. I've wasted so much time just wondering and worrying about like, what is they gonna think? What is she gonna think? What is he gonna think? Like, what if I do this? What if I fuck this up? And it just doesn't matter. Like, nobody cares about you is what I've realized in life. Like, nobody gives a fucking shit about you in life. So you may as well just try to focus on yourself and not worry about how other people are gonna think about you.
Facts. Facts. How did you, like, were there things that you did that helped you sort of get to that place of just being like, I don't give a damn? Because really and truly, I'm just one drop in the sea of like humans. There's 7 billion of us. I really don't think that there's like this huge like entourage that's just stalking every move I make with like judgment.
Frankly, I haven't reached that point yet. And like, will I ever reach that point? I don't know, because I still do think about it. And I still invest energy in those like pointless
It's
pursuits.
human. Yeah, I feel it.
Yeah.
It's just natural, I think, a little bit to be like, question, doubt.
Yeah, so I can't really tell you confidently that like, yeah, I'm over it. But again, I think it just comes back to what I said, where like, I recognize that the society we live in now is, I think, quite shallow. Again, I'm not saying that I'm above that. Like, I definitely feel like I'm not far off from that. And I think we kind of like make judgments about people within the first minute of speaking with them or knowing them, really. So what I've sort of realized is like, if that's the operational rhythm for how people view other people, then all you can really do is try to make a good impression and try to be nice to everyone and try to like take care of yourself, and hopefully people like you. And at the end of the day, like, not everyone's going to like you, not everyone's going to be your friend, and sometimes like you have to just accept that it's not about like having people like you. It's about doing what's ultimately going to be the best thing for yourself, and what's going to ultimately provide like the most utility for yourself
Mm,
and for society.
I feel it. I feel it. But quick question. So, what did you study in Wharton again? It was related to just financial consulting or just like business or investment banking?
No, so basically, as you'll know, like the first couple of years, you kind of do all your prerequisites, which are pretty general.
Yeah.
My idea was to, and then you declare your major at some point. My idea was to do finance, which would mean a career in investment banking. Basically, investment banking, like, they offer financial services or market making. So, if, for example, if a company wants to acquire another company, someone will underwrite that deal and make that happen. Other like that's typical investment banking activity. There's also other services that an investment bank would offer, like market making, which is basically just providing liquidity for bonds and stocks and stuff like that. When I was taking those courses, I realized that like I don't actually find it very interesting. Like I didn't find it to be interesting, and I was more drawn towards my marketing and entrepreneurship classes, which were more around like working with people, talking with people, thinking about things, presenting ideas, talking a bit more. Like, and I found those were what I enjoyed more and where my skill set actually lay more naturally. Because growing up, I was always, as you remember, I was always a bit
Yeah,
of like
always
yeah, a bit
selling
of
some shit.
a bit of a chatterbox actually to be fair. So I studied marketing and entrepreneurship, and then I went into sales as a career, starting with an office renovation company as their sales guy, and then I moved to MongoDB, which is a database company. So database is basically part of any application. You have to put the data in there so it can feed it to the front end, right? So we offer a database that's like more suited for modern applications, things like IoT use cases, mobile use cases. So that's um,
Hmm.
that's what I ended up going into, and I think it's been like an absolute blessing to be able to work in tech sales. And I wish someone earlier on in my life told me that this is actually a really good path for someone
Yeah.
with these traits.
I'm curious, like, because I definitely think you have always exhibited like the skill sets of being a good salesperson and like obviously getting your customer to sort of buy into the story or the solution that you're presenting. When you then studied that, was there particular like strategies that you were like, oh shit, like this was kind of what I've always been doing, or it was something sort of like it just sort of felt natural and it didn't really feel like there was like a lot of effort in taking a sales role? Because I think a salesperson is a very particular type of person because you kind of have to go out there, be a little bit vulnerable, make those connections, which can be challenging in a world where like there's like all these ads that are constantly like trying to get you to buy something or feel some type of way to actually like get someone to say yes, to whatever it is that you're like proposing for them.
Yeah, I mean, so I didn't study sales particularly. I studied marketing
Okay.
and entrepreneurship. So and that goes back to my earlier point around like, I don't feel like I strictly needed a college degree to do
Okay,
this job.
okay.
To your question, I think there are some traits that make someone well suited for sales, and those traits could be something like, being having an outgoing personality, because people want to generally buy from people that they like or that gives them a positive vibe. I think like resilience, which you touched on, is crucial, because generally people are going to reject you, and you're going to face more rejections than deals closed. However, I would say number one, I'm still learning every single day, and the way that our company approaches sales is it's not B2C sales. So it's not like I'm offering like I don't know, like, let's say like, an energy drink, for example, where there's so much choices and like the differentiation is not that big. Our sales is B2B, and it's a lot more strategic in the sense of our deals would take a longer time to close, and there's a lot around building relationships with people, building trust with people. And so I think like if you think of a salesman, you think of someone who's like a really smooth talker, very energetic, like very like, like doing everything at once. Whereas I think in reality, like the best salesmen that I've seen are calm, like very strategic, extremely intelligent in how they understand an industry and understand the customer and understand, kind of what's important now and where the customer wants to go. So I think that's something that I've learned on the job, and something I've realized that like that's a different level. Like
Hmm.
you could be a very raw salesman and be great at like door to door sales, where the key skill is your resilience and just your work rate. But I think if you have those great traits and then you combine them with the intelligence needed for some of the more complex deals, then I think that's where you get like a really strong salesperson.
Hmm. Very interesting. And I guess like did you have to like how did you go about learning about databases and like becoming sort of an expert in that area? Because like you were saying, like databases are really the backbone of like a lot of the
Yeah,
tools that we use today. Like any piece of data that's created needs to go
yeah,
somewhere, you know? So
right.
it's like definitely one of those like essential resources for almost any industry today. It's going to require a database of some sort, whether it's public or private, you know?
Yeah, I mean, well, every single application will need a database. Well, they'll need data of some sort. Now, whether they keep that data or not is a different question, because then you get into like streaming technologies like Kafka and all that stuff. I would say like I'm by no means an expert in databases, and I don't think I'll ever be an expert in databases because there's just you know this as well. The IT ecosystem is just so huge. There's so much you can always be learning about. So yeah, I wouldn't say I'm an expert. I think like I've just tried to learn a little bit about the industry, and really what I've found is it's knowing your product, but it's really more understanding the customer and what they need, because the customer doesn't need everything. So you don't need to know everything. You just need to know what's going to be relevant to them. And if you just prepare for the meeting and try put your best hypothesis forward, it usually leads to a fruitful conversation.
Hmm. Very interesting. And I guess like from B2B, is there specific sectors that you guys like focus on? Like is it mostly specific like types of applications or types of yeah, like I guess yeah, like industries that like you guys are specifically tailoring your solution towards?
So I'll answer the industry question first. So MongoDB is a general purpose database, so you can use it for a wide range of use cases. But fundamentally, there's been a shift in just the way companies operate, and that's like a widespread global digital transformation. So if you look at any company, their ability to be successful is really dependent on their software capabilities, because every single thing, as you said, is generating data. So how you leverage that data can achieve, increase revenues. You can use that data to streamline your operations, and you can cut costs. You can use that data to, offer better customer experiences and increase your competitive advantage, win more market share. So if you look at a company like 7-Eleven, for example, they've got so much data on customers, what they've been buying, what customers like. And if you can leverage that data meaningfully to personalize the user experience and personalize the shopping experience, you can achieve a lot of those things, right? Increase loyalty, you can upsell people. Similarly, if you look at something like Coinbase, which is another large customer of MongoDB's, the whole platform is built on MongoDB. They've also got loads of information that they need. One, they'll have information on how much actual holdings you have, that wallet data that needs to be pretty strong. They'll have information on you as a person. They'll also have a lot of information that they need to report on for compliance purposes. So all of this data has to live somewhere. And crucially, what's happening now is, see, back in the day, you didn't necessarily need things in real time, and you didn't necessarily need an application to work always, right? Like you sometimes would go on a website and it'd say, oh, we're down right now for maintenance. But in a global market where you could have customers who are accessing your platform 24/7, and especially in a market where the customer loyalty is very low and the switching costs are very low. So if tomorrow Amazon doesn't work for me anymore and there's a harsha.com, and there's no problem for me to use harsha.com because I don't feel loyalty towards Amazon. It's just a soulless corporation. So it's really become all about how good can the customer experience be, how quick can this application work, and you need to keep developing to attract customers, and your platform needs to be available all the time. And fundamentally, MongoDB's technology enables all of that to happen. So real time experiences where you want to add features very quickly and where you need a certain level of service resilience, which is typically 99.99995% of the time. That's where we would come in.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think it's crazy, like sometimes when you think about like how all of these businesses are dependent on like data servers and like if one of them goes down, like I think Amazon was down for a period of time and because of that, like Netflix was broken, Disney was broken, like all of these other services that you take for granted, or you just think like, oh, they're their own company, actually are dependent on like all of these other things that if one goes down, then it's kind of like it puts it into question of like what are we actually getting. And technically these companies are also all rivals and they're all like kind of competing but also leveraging each other's solutions, that kind of makes it like a very tricky situation sometimes.
Yeah, well, that's kind of one of our selling points, really, is that our platform is multi cloud. So we have customers in retail, for example, like Boots or Marks and Spencer's, where like they're using Amazon Web Services, but fundamentally, Amazon Web Services, Amazon, the retail part, is a big competitor to them, eating into their market share every day. So it's kind of like you're indirectly funding your competition.
Exactly,
Um,
exactly.
so that's kind of why we say with Mongo, you can host it on any cloud. So if you ever need to move
Mm,
cloud providers for whatever reason, you can. And I think you've seen Amazon really like try to get their foot into many different businesses, right? And the business ecosystem is changing so quickly. It's like you need a degree of flexibility as a company. And you look at even like Bing recently, right, with the Chat GPT integration, all of a sudden Google's on the back foot now. So like and I honestly, until a couple months ago, could never foresee a future where Google would suffer, especially because search is their key business.
their
So
yeah, that's their baby right there. Like,
yeah. So you don't know, right? Like you don't know how things can change. So you need that like flexibility and agnosticity as well.
yeah, it's been interesting, like being on the engineering side of like, even though I don't work in cloud, like there's so much that's like been going on, with like AI and cloud and like what that means for the business and kind of like even what that means for, consumer electronics and what we can do. And it's interesting, like when I talk to folks about what is the difference between like Azure and AWS, like fundamentally from like a business perspective. And, I think for like most customers, they just think of it as like, oh, it's the cloud,
Yeah.
black box, doesn't really matter what it does, but they're both like set up very differently to tackle like very different problems and for like very different customers. And I didn't even realize that for the longest while. Like that is why a lot of like your Netflix and your Disney and your Hulu will go to Amazon, because it's built to be like a streaming service, where like you're getting data in real time across like multiple different users that are all streaming the same content, and it needs to be able to broadcast without a lot of glitching and things like that. Whereas like Azure is really built for businesses, like actually built to help you scale your business. And there's like trade-offs that they make to do that. But it's like as a customer, you don't really think about that. You're just like, oh, like there's Amazon and there's Microsoft, and I'm just gonna go with whichever one is cheaper. Um, but then like going even back to the whole like the types of data that you store and like how you're supposed to handle that data, because then there's all like the security side of things and like compliance. And I'm sure in Europe like it's even stricter, like the laws around data protection and like making sure
Yeah.
that users data is not being mishandled or like just nefarious mumbo jumbo happening. I guess like how do you guys deal with security, or are there things that you guys highlight as part of your solution that puts a priority around security, especially given that you guys are in like that European market, which is very, very strict?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, even forget the European market. Globally, there's so many different regulations, and they differ country to country. Like China, Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, Argentina. These are countries where you can't even put data into the public cloud, because that's the level of like rigor and classification that they want to keep their citizens' data private, right? So I think there's two answers to your question. The first one is the way that MongoDB's technology scales. Typically, scaling would be just adding more CPU and RAM to an existing box, or vertically scaling it, right? What's become more prevalent in recent decades and years is horizontal scaling, or being able to actually split that workload across multiple boxes rather than just keep building up. And that has cost advantages, but from a security perspective and a compliance perspective, you can actually use MongoDB in such a way where you can pin data geographically to a certain place. So you can actually split up your database such that US data stays here and that can go to the cloud, whereas data in China will remain on-prem. So we can do some really fancy things to obey with data sovereignty laws in that sense. Now, from a pure security perspective, we've got quite a few encryption capabilities around like field level encryption, and now even things like queryable encryption. So you have a very high level of protection on the actual data. So if you got breached for whatever reason, they would just be seeing random numbers and letters. It wouldn't actually be any useful data for them.
Yeah.
Um, And then outside of that, you've got like your typical, authorization controls, like ability to audit the database and see who's done what with your data. So all of that stuff, I think security is really becoming more of a basic requirement rather than a nice to have. So it's less of like a selling point for us. It's more kind of just like, yeah, we do
You
it.
either got it or you don't, and
Yeah,
it's gonna
yeah,
be that, that
yeah,
line that we draw. It's like,
yeah, yeah. Because obviously, there's a big risk
exactly.
in your data getting, into the wrong hands, or you falling afoul of some kind of regulation, right?
Yeah, the fines are no joke. Like they do not play games when it comes to data violations. But it's like at the same time, most people I feel like just don't even understand the magnitude of why that's important. So it's like, oh, like I saw something about like Facebook is like paying out like a settlement because like their data was breached or something. And like if you happen to have a Facebook account, like you could, I don't know, claim something. Maybe it's a scam, who knows? But it's just interesting to think about like the power that our data has, but like the lack of education that people have around the power of their data. So it's kind of just like people look at it as a free resource, but it's like the data you make is like so valuable. Like it's literally driving like so many business decisions across so many different like sectors. And for most of us, like we don't get paid at all like for it, which I hope that changes in the future, but who knows? Who knows what they'll do. And with, I don't know, quantum computing and all of that, like that just makes like encryption even more difficult because then it's like they're going to have to double down on their approach of encryption and ensuring that like these quantum computers can't just break these more traditional, despite complex encryption methods that we are like currently using. um problems.
Well, I feel like most of the data that is like, okay, outside of things like your passport number and stuff where they can directly, impact you, you're volunteering most of your data anyway.
Yeah.
So you're giving it, right? Like you're consenting to them using it, and once they have access to what does Harsha like, who does Harsha know, what products does she use, what is she afraid of, like, they can use all of that data to basically influence you however they want. And I think that's really more like, my fear would be less around like the cyber crime, which I'm sure is going to grow, but more around like how these companies are, and even organizations and governments are able to use your data to influence
Hmm.
you, and kind of
Yeah.
keep you in a bubble in some ways.
Exactly. I feel like Instagram is a perfect example of that because everybody's
Yeah,
Instagram is entirely different. Like from
yeah,
person to person, you're just like, oh shit, like this is what you see. Like I don't even see this at all. Or like, or that's why I'm seeing it is because you liked it and because you
yeah,
liked it. Now it's showing up in my feed. And I do worry about that sometimes of like this, like, there's like the pursuit of personalizing all of our experiences that it kind of like isolates us in this like weird way of like we create this like weird feedback loop of like the system knows us better than we know ourselves, and so we kind of lose to some degree this like ability of having free choice because it's not really
yeah,
free choice. It's not giving you choice. It's just trying to like bet on like what is going to get you to buy, which is like a weird like, it's almost like, I don't know if you remember in AP Psych, there was that example of like the rat that they would give cocaine or whatever, and it would just like literally killed itself because it was just like constantly rewarding itself through coke. And I feel like it's kind of that the same way of like we're constantly getting these like dopamine releases just through like our experiences in the internet and the data that we provide, that it creates this weird like feedback of like only focusing on the instant gratification that you get through a lot of these experiences rather than like having meaningful connection or like buying something that's actually of value. It's just like, oh well, it was on sale and all the influencers had it, so I needed to have it. I needed it. Who would I be without it? And it's just like, is that what we're trying to move towards? And like these are the things that I like question a lot at work of like the things that we do and why we're doing it that way. And it's like, but what about the people though? Or like what about like our human nature though? And with AI, like it's only gonna get crazier from here. Like it's just kind of crazy to think that we're now in this time of AI because it's like, no, it's here. Like it's here and they're ready. Like they have been ready for a very long time. And so it's just like crazy to see how that will change the world. are they considering like leveraging ChatGPT to help optimize like the data that your clients store to the cloud and help give them, because like it's one thing to have data, but like it's another thing to like actually be able, like you said, to get meaningful value out of your data, or like add the sort of human context to data. Is that something that they're looking into, like a lot of like Power BI driven like analysis? Or yeah, I guess like what do they do once you give them all this data, or is it normally just for like user experience driven output?
Are you talking about like how MongoDB as a company is going to use
Yeah.
ChatGPT, or
Or well, not necessarily. Like, is that, I'm just curious if that's something they're considering to like help give their solution more value to customers. Because then, like, you could leverage ChatGPT to ask it, like, or like, what are the trends in the data set, for this quarter, or like, things like that, where it might take, a data analyst a few days to like generate that report. Like, ChatGPT could just give you the answer.
yeah, I mean that's not really what our product is about, because our product
Okay,
is just
okay,
right like a place to put the data. So like
okay, okay.
for example, how AI ML works, or as far as I think it does, is you put all of the relevant data you need to train your models into something like
Yeah.
MongoDB, and then you train your
Okay,
models on top
okay.
of MongoDB. But it's more like the end customer can obviously use ChatGPT for a number of use cases, as can MongoDB's like certain teams. Like I use ChatGPT every day for researching and like just understanding some of the more dense technical subjects. But yeah, I'm not sure what the like corporate strategy is with
Hmm.
ChatGPT.
I mean, it's still very early. It'll be interesting, I think, to see once it becomes like there are more services built around it, and like there are more tools, and also just I think the education component, because like now I feel like the entire workforce is going to now be trained on like leveraging AI, and I don't know. It's interesting to see how that will play out. I guess like what do you think about AI? Or are you like all for it? You're like hell yeah.
I think like generally with technology, right? Like if you were the best horse rider 200 years ago and then cars came in, like it doesn't really matter if you're the best horse rider anymore, except for really certain things. So for that matter, like it might be a bit sad that some of the best writers in the world, or the best copywriters in the world, like they may be losing some of their edge because there's something that can do it faster and potentially better than them. But I think, like with everything in life, it's adapt or die. And for me, I do think, like especially for a salesperson, there's going to be a delta between the people that are adopting ChatGPT now and when it becomes really widespread. So for me personally, I'm happy to use ChatGPT as much as I can, and I think in the short term, it's a tool that can really help you. In the long term, I think yeah, AI definitely has the potential to disrupt, the workforce and industries, and I think there needs to be some really thoughtful legislation around AI, especially with things like deep fake videos and like that ability to there is that potential for it to be abusive, like there is with everything. So my opinion is like I don't think it's going anywhere. I think it's definitely gonna exponentially increase in usage. And the question is, do you want to be part of that wave, and do you want to stay relevant, or do you want to like just ignore it and hope it goes away? That's up to you. I think I'll take the former.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not going away. So it's like either become obsolete and be like, I want to stay in the old way, or you just like, take it for what it is and like at least have it be of value. Because I agree, like sometimes, especially with writing things, it's like you just give it a prompt and it's like, hey, can you write me a podcast description about XYZ? And it's like, "Boom, here you go." And it's like, you know what? This isn't bad. I can work with this. And the way that I look at it is really like it's supposed to be a tool to enhance your productivity. Like it shouldn't be taking away from you. It's supposed to be, if anything, like freeing you up to do more of like what you love and less of the stuff that you don't. But I agree, like it'll definitely take some adjusting. But for me it's more of the concern of like, will it make us lazier? Of like because you have like there's like a talent to being a great writer, and it's like, well, if ChatGPT just writes like every Nobel Prize winning book of the future, what does that really say about like human creativity, or like the what it
Well,
means to be human, you know?
I think at the same time, like we've had access to Google for the last 20 years. Google is fun, like ChatGPT is trained on a lot of information you can find through multiple sources in Google. Nevertheless, like think about it, like tonight you could learn, you know, like 30 words of German within an hour. There's nothing stopping you from doing it except your own kind of like unwillingness to do something. So you have chat gpt, there's still billions of people that aren't using it. So I think it does come down a little bit to like people's personality with these things. I think, yeah, probably we have as a culture become a lot lazier because our basic needs of food and shelter are taken care of pretty handily, right? Like we've solved a lot of those problems. Like we're not dying from malaria or like hunting in a forest anymore. And I think ChatGPT and AI is like a continuation of that. I don't think it'll be able to replace everything. And then you get into a whole different discussion of like, well, if it does replace everything, then what is the sort of point of living, and like how do we cover for these people? Like, do we offer a universal basic
Yeah.
income or not? I don't know, but I think like for myself, like I'll always have some level of inherent motivation to do something. So I'm not gonna just be happy
Roll
to let
over and
AI do everything. Yeah,
yeah.
like because in theory you could have like a robot chef. You could have like robot everything
Everything.
really, right? Like
Yeah.
robot
Yeah.
firefighters, like and there is a business case to be made, like rather than having someone like for example driving a truck across really icy roads. If you can have an autonomous vehicle doing it, you'll save lives. Everything will be better. And I think those use cases, maybe it's worth considering. But I think like would you really want to go watch a movie, or would you want to go to a concert where it's like a robot performing? Like there's just something about that doesn't feel like it's just kind of like
I
what's
feel
what's the
you.
point?
But if it was like a deep fake of like Tupac generating new, music, there's like
Yeah,
people
yeah,
are making all of those
right.
like auto-tuned
Like
like
Drake
of Kanye.
songs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah,
where it's
and they're
like
not bad either,
different
right?
music. Exactly. I agree. I think it'll be interesting seeing kind of how things unfold. I think it'll definitely challenge, or I would hope push people to think more critically, because like with the whole deep fake thing, I absolutely love like the content that comes out. It's so meme worthy. But at the same time, like humans are so stupid sometimes. It's just like they're like, "Oh my god, a human made this." And it's like, "No, a human wrote the prompt for it, but like a human didn't make it." And it's like, how do we train ourselves to know what is real and what isn't? And I think like even right now, like we've been struggling with that since like the inception of the internet, of like what is real information and what is misinformation. And I agree, it will be interesting to see what kind of legislation they come up with to help deal with that. Or maybe, yeah, maybe it's just more courses on critical thinking and making sure people can really tell the difference, or it just becomes a requirement to like tag content that's been made by an AI or altered by AI, so that people are aware that like like with cigarettes, they're like, this will give you cancer, and they'll be like, well, this was made by an AI. And
Yeah, I think like maybe this is a bit of a cynical view. Like I think at the end of the day, nothing has changed that much in the world in the last few hundred years. Like I believe there are organizations kind of like setting the rules and the tone for this playground that we all find ourselves in. And I think like day to day, at the end of the day, like your life isn't going to change that fundamentally. You'll wake up in the morning, you still have to eat food. Like you're going to want to find some partner to like spend time with and be romantic with. You're going to want to feel fulfilled by potentially having children or like doing something to fulfill yourself. Like these are basic human needs, and they're not going to
go
change
away.
that
Yeah.
drastically, right? Like chat gpt might come in and it might change like the music industry, and like things will evolve and change. Like even if you think about it, like electronic music, like I'm sure someone 50 years ago is like, that's not even an instrument, like that guy's just using a computer, like that's a robot making that music, right? So I think like we are going to adjust to it, and it's going to like change some things, but it's not going to change, like it's not going to fundamentally change
Who we
things
are.
too much.
Yeah.
Like we're like if you look at like the kids in the 70s versus now, like the only difference is now we've got like more tech and more ways to like show off and stuff like that. But the core of it, like teenagers will always behave the same. Like everyone will always have the same basic needs and ways to fulfill them. It's just how it's done, and that might be changing.
I feel it. Yeah, I think that's like one thing I did want to like eventually do a whole episode on is like the difference between AI and actual consciousness, because it's like I think we often confuse the two and think that like they're the same thing, and it's like not at all. They were like not even close to the same thing. But yeah, I think it's even just appreciating like what it means to actually be human, and maybe AI will just give us more space to recognize like what is actually special about being a human being and less of like a worker bee. So we'll see. We'll see what the future holds. But it was an absolute pleasure chatting with you. I absolutely love your perspective. Like you haven't changed like in that regard at all, which I absolutely love. Like I'm just like not cynical at all. I'm just like you're just being real, which I appreciate. So
Yeah, I'm a bit cynical in nature, or maybe a bit pessimistic in general,
it's
but that's
realism, it's a healthy dose of reality.
yeah. I mean, it's easy to get lost in the noise of like your day to
Yeah,
day and Instagram and like flashy stuff that's happening, and just always feeling. I think like one of the kind of tenets of Buddhism is you'll perpetually be dissatisfied with what you have, and like tomorrow if you like you're working at Microsoft right now, like that's you're in a better position now than you were 5 years ago, but you probably still don't feel completely satisfied. Like you're still looking for
yeah.
like the next thing or the next thing that can offer
That
you fulfillment,
intrinsic
right?
motivation. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. So I mean, yeah, these are things. I don't know where I was going with that point actually, but
No worries, no worries. I guess like is there anything else like you like want to share before we wrap up for the people, that are like what has RJ been up to, or like I don't know, even advice for like kids, on the island right now that are just trying to figure out like what the hell they want to do, and they're like conflicted about the direction and what the future really has in store for them, given everything that you've learned just in this journey so far, and yeah, all the growth that has occurred.
I would say this is easy. Like it's always easy to give other people advice and you don't take it yourself. But I would say like don't feel like don't over stress things. Like it's not going to be as bad as you think it is. And sometimes I get anxiety and I feel like, oh my god, if I don't do this and this and this, like it means this and that and that. And it's not true. Like just remember at the end of the day, like everybody's out here and everyone's kind of like faking it a little bit. So just do what makes you happy, and realize that like in life, like money isn't everything, status isn't everything, like but your happiness and just you feeling satisfied with yourself, which is, I mean, if someone has advice to me on how to get there, I'd love to take it. But just feeling like that internal satisfaction is more important than looking good in front of your friends or having money or showing off or any of that stuff. Because at the end of the day, like you can have more and more and more material and more status and stuff, but you may never feel truly accomplished or satisfied. So just look for what really makes you happy and go for that, and don't feel like you need to live up to other people's expectations of you.